Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone coming in from around the world to the Workspot webinar. We are shooting live today from the corporate headquarters of Workspot here. Myself, Brad Peterson, and Amitabh Sinha. Amitabh?
Hey, everybody.
Yes, and we are shooting live from the San Jose area of California. It's mighty nice out there. Beautiful weather. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to go through a lot of beautiful content today. We're going to share a little bit about what Workspot really is. If you're not familiar, just a little bit of primer right there. And then we're going to go into this detailed story of how to migrate your VDI environment from an on-prem world into a cloud world, whatever cloud that might be. All right, so there's a lot of details there. There's a lot of folks that have experience there, some people that don't have experience there, and we're going to give you experience there today. And by the way, feel free to ask questions along the way. And when you pop in your questions real time, we'll handle them as we go. And as we do go into the system, into the webinar today, we're going to actually ask you guys a couple of webinar questions as well. Okay, hopefully that's good for you guys. Get a little response from you. All right, now here's the agenda for today's call. All right, so we're going to just do a little primer on Workspot, just real quick about who we are in the world of VDI and DaaS and end user computing, you know, and so you're familiar with our capabilities. And from there, again, key questions about DaaS migration. How in the world do you migrate when you're looking to move out of a data center in on-prem and then into a cloud? Okay. Now, first things we're going to ask you guys a couple of quick questions. Okay. So the first polling question is, you know, how would you characterize your app delivery environment? Okay. Now we got three choices there, so you can pick all three if you like, but there's three. So the first is, are you doing app virt, you know, kind of Windows virtualization, maybe some desktop virt, and that's either Windows or Linux. And are you using enterprise browser yet? All right, so now you can click all those if they all apply. If you're looking at doing a secure browser, an enterprise browser, and you're looking to move into app or desktop, or just click all the buttons that apply to you, okay? Then thanks for entering that data in, cool. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go on to the next question here, and that second question is, now that you're doing app and desktop virt and so forth, the question is, where are you hosting all of that? So this is also multiple choice here, so you can actually choose, you know, the corporate data center or a colo. Are you doing it in one of the big clouds out there, Azure, Google, GCP, you know, AWS, or maybe even another cloud? So you can click on not only the ones that represent where you're hosting today, but or the ones you want to go to, the ones of interest to you. This is all going to help kind of set us up for this conversation today about migration into those clouds and how in the world do you do that. Okay, cool. All right, so let's close that out there. And we're going to just jump right into this here. The very first section, again, is to tell you a little bit about Workspot. Okay, and remember, pop your questions into the question bar there if you like, and we'll take them as we go. All right, so to give you some context here, if you're familiar with the world of VDI and end user computing, you're probably familiar with that left-hand stack that you see over there. Okay, so right in the center of that, you're going to see Citrix, the VDI brokerage platform, you know, sort of section in there, and that could be Omnissa, maybe a few other things. Now that runs on a hypervisor, Broadcom, and that runs on typically in a data center, a stack of servers, storage, networking, and so on. Now on top of that, how are you securely accessing that? Maybe a NetScaler, maybe some other type of appliance equipment, and then how are you monitoring that whole thing? Well, maybe it's control up, maybe it's various other things. So look at that stack you typically deal with on-prem. Now we know there's a storm going on out there. Certainly in the world of VDI with Citrix and Broadcom, the notion of the costs associated with this and the complexity, it's really changed over time. And that really puts you in a position to reevaluate these things. So for your virtual desktops and virtual apps, things are getting more expensive and more complicated. Now, if you take that stack and you look for alternatives across there, you might be looking at, well, like we talked about earlier, the enterprise browser. Well, you might look at Island.io. And what about moving it into the cloud, the DaaS services that are there, right? So Amazon Workspaces, Windows 365 AVD, and so on. And you can see if you want to optimize that with FinOps and you want to monitor that with DEX, there are a lot of different choices out there in the world to look at. Now, those are all from different companies, but what you might not be familiar with is the fact that these point solutions and their value add actually is a part of the Workspot offering. So the Workspot offering, purpose-built, unified platform, delivers the enterprise browser, delivers VDI on-prem as well as DaaS in a cloud as a service, optimizes the costs associated with that, and monitors and deals with all observability and full-on DEX. all baked into the product. And when you do that, you're going to find that the end user experience is unified also. The end user installs Workspot client, and you can see here, they'll see their icons, and when they click on them, they're going to access the enterprise browser for web applications, and they'll access virtual Windows applications as well as virtual Windows and Linux desktops, all in one space. So that's pretty cool. That is Workspot. Now, if you have any more questions on that, we can go into that in greater detail later, but that gives you kind of a high-level view of the offerings of Workspot. Okay, now we're going to shift gears here, and we're going to go and spend the rest of the webinar going into how in the world do I migrate from a data center, which I'm very well comfortable with, into various clouds that are out there in the world that I may not have that much experience. So, and also, how does Workspot help you do that? Okay, now we're going to ask you one more polling question before we go, and that polling question is, what are your biggest challenges, your issues with VDI today? Okay, this is multiple choice again, so pick your top two, maybe three in here. All right, and so if you take a look at that list, is it cost? So is it cost of software licensing, or is it cost of cloud costs themselves? Is it a DEX issue that you have? Is it user experience? Is it complexity? You can click, I'd say click on your top two. If three of them are pertinent to you, go ahead and pick that third one. But other than that, just pick the top two, and then we will get a look at what is most important to you. Okay, good, excellent. Thanks for the votes. All right, let's close that out. And we will now jump into the second part of the presentation. Now, Amitabh is going to jump in and take us right into the DaaS migration topic. And there's a lot going on here. And remember, if you have questions, feel free to launch those in the question box. We'll keep an eye on it. Amitabh.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. So these are the 6 questions we narrowed it down to from about 15 questions that we had in our heads. First section is architecture, on-prem versus cloud. Am I locked into a single cloud provider? Then it's about cost. A lot of people are worried about the cloud being way more expensive than on-prem. Then it's about performance. Will our users experience better or worse performance in the cloud? Then it's about DEX, which is can I effectively troubleshoot issues in the cloud? It's not in my data center anymore. I don't have visibility anymore. How do I troubleshoot stuff? And then last is, does my team have the skills? Can I migrate? How long will it going to take me? So at a high level, those are the 5 or 6 questions we think are important. There's a whole bunch of other questions, and if there are questions you would really like answered, put them in the chat box, and we'll try to include them in the next presentation or try to answer them today. So question number 1 is, hey, I've been doing this on-prem for the last 10, 15, 20 years. Is it different in the cloud? Or do I just copy what I have? And I think the words we use is, the phrase we use is, forget everything you know about VDI, because it's completely different, right? On-prem, you're planning for capacity, you're planning for peak usage, and so you're planning for infrastructure that might be required up front. Cloud DaaS is very different. Yeah, you're planning for use cases, it's per user cost. You're not worried about all the infrastructure you're going to use because you're going to fine tune it down to each user. In the on-prem, you're worried about, you have one data center, maybe 2 or 3 across the world. The cloud, you have hundreds of regions across the world. And if you can take advantage of the regions across the world, you get low latency placement. CapEx versus OpEx, this is also a big difference. On-prem, you're buying all the infrastructure you need upfront. Cloud, you're using it and paying for it as you go, but it shows up as OpEx. So it's a different financial mechanism. And then if you, most people took 9, 12, 18 months to implement VDI on-prem the first time they did it. Cloud can be much faster. So small implementations, we have had customers go live in 2 weeks, but I would say 3 to 6 months is about the average we would see. So it's not going to take you a whole bunch of time, but it still needs some amount of planning. So it's not immediate. So the summary out of this slide that I would say for everybody is, forget everything you know about VDI because the cloud looks completely different.
In fact, if you try to take your lessons from VDI and move it into the cloud, you'll find it doesn't serve you.
Correct. Yeah. So do not do what you did on-prem in the cloud. It's completely different. I think the second question we get from customers is, will we be locked into a single cloud? So having gone through the experience with Broadcom and so on in the last 12, 18 months, I think a lot of people are rightly worried about, if I pick a cloud, am I going to be stuck in that cloud forever? And the answer is no. We support the three big clouds, Azure, AWS, and GCP. You can use any of these three clouds, any region of these three clouds. So we're not restricted to the regions that exist today. All of these clouds are building regions every single day. These regions are automatically available to us. We don't need to do anything different. There are licensing issues. There are no licensing issues on AWS and Azure. There are licensing limitations on GCP today. And then we can support all the use cases, right? So web and Windows apps, persistent Windows and Linux desktops, non-persistent Windows and Linux desktops. And think of these as tools available to migrate your use cases over. And choose your favorite cloud, choose your favorite region, choose more than one cloud, and you can do all of those permutations and combinations.
And to be clear here, the big blue cloud in the middle is the Workspot Cloud Service.
Correct. So we operate the DaaS infrastructure as a service. There are three components to the service. Control is the configuration engine, where you set up who the users are, what the identity provider is, what the image management is. Watch is where you monitor for real-time alarms if things are going wrong in the system, and trends is analytics to show you how you're spending money and any other user experience trends. And I will show you some examples of how these operate. These three are, there's workflows that go across these three in order to optimize cost as well as optimize user experience. So that's question number 2. You don't need to be locked into a single cloud. Question number 3, which is probably the most, the one we hear the most, is cloud more expensive than on-prem? And if you do it right, no, you can reduce the cost by 80%. And the reason is pretty simple, because on-prem, you're actually running a data center which is at pretty low utilization, 12 to 18%. So pick an average 15% utilization. And it's pretty obvious why, because peak happens maybe 1 or 2 hours in a day. The remaining 20 hours in a month is just sitting there, and it's underutilized. And the whole stack is underutilized, right? Because all the way from storage service networking to the licensing, everything is underutilized in the cloud, on-prem. And there's multiple reports out there from IBM, McKinsey, and National Resources Defense Council sort of attesting to that. And I'm sure all of you are familiar with that. The big difference in the cloud is many of the optimizations we've done allow you to provision resources just in time and just enough so that you're not over provisioning, right? So you want the resources to be available when a user logs in, and you want just enough resources so that you're not provisioning over capacity. And if you do that, then you can be at 90-95% utilization in terms of infrastructure. And so you go from 15% utilization to 90-95% utilization on the right. And that's significant cost savings. And the interesting thing is, if you do that, you only pay for what a user usage, and we use AI to help you do that. So here are some examples from 4 different customers. The deployment choices range between persistent and non-persistent, CPU and GPU. There are different techniques we use to optimize cost between those 4 choices. The column over is how much is the usage per user per day. And all of us think that everybody's working 140 hours a week, 4 weeks a month. In reality, what we find is for different use cases, the usage is very different. It could be as less as 1 hour a day, or what we are seeing it for full-time users, it's about 6 hours a day, but it's only for 18-20 days a week, a month. So that's about 120 hours. Between 60 to 120 hours is what we see of utilization. So if you take just the off-the-shelf pricing, on-demand pricing, it ranges between 20 cents an hour for a 2x8 machine to 75 cents an hour for a reasonably powerful GPU machine. You multiply that with the usage and you get the IaaS cost per user per month. And if you look at line 3 for this energy company, it's about $14 per user per month. And it's now at a per user level. So you're not paying for all the infrastructure that all the users might use. It's just for the user who's using that infrastructure. Now, a lot of customers are worried about runaway cloud costs, and so they're looking at the flat rate pricing for 3-year commitments and so on. And those are actually significantly expensive. So even after the discounts you get on the flat rate pricing, it can be quite expensive because that assumes a certain amount of usage per month. But because the usage patterns look very different, you can get to significant savings, 40, 50, 60, 70% savings, depending on your use case, if you use the optimizations we have built in. And I'll show you in the next few animations how we optimize it, how we help you measure, how we help you reduce the cost. But if you take advantage of all the optimizations we have done, you can significantly reduce the cost per user per month. And by the way, have it completely assigned to each user. So you don't have to worry about, like you can justify every user's cost to the business unit, right? So you don't have to quote a price for the whole infrastructure. It's per user for which business they are in, and say this business for this user costs me X dollars per user per month. That's completely justifiable.
And it might be surprising to a lot of IT folks, the number of hours their users are actually using or not using the service.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I think our range is 60 to 120 hours per month, 60 for contract use cases and about 120 for full-time use cases.
Right.
Across all our customers.
All the customers, because we can see all that data.
We can see all that data.
Customers can't, but customers that use Workspot then can see that data too, because we provide that.
And most people, by the way, you don't need to measure all this stuff on-prem because the machines are paid for 24/7. It doesn't really matter. But in the cloud, you can see it and you can optimize for it.
But that's the problem, because on-prem, they just assume they're using it all day long.
Yes.
But they're not.
They're not.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here are the ways we help you optimize cost. Just-in-time provisioning, real-time alarms for when infrastructure doesn't work as well as excess capacity, AI-driven usage forecast, and AI-driven just-enough provisioning. And I'll show you some screenshots. This is inside Workspot control. So this is the configuration engine where, based on the kind of use case, non-persistent versus persistent, timeout versus whether you want to pause machines or hibernate them, delete them, run them, you can configure different per pool of users and say, here's what I want the system to behave. Then you have real-time alarms, which shows up in our Workspot watch console, which is showing you if things didn't go as advertised. And I would say the error rate for infrastructure API is about 0.1%. But if you have a few thousand users, that 0.1% can be high, right? So for example, if you try to pause a machine to save on cost, and if it didn't pause, not only you're paying for money, but that user won't be able to reconnect. So you want those alarms coming in real time so you can go fix them. The next thing we monitor is excess capacity, right? So this is an example of a call center. The usage is on top, the blue line. The red line is excess capacity. So more capacity was allocated, and there are no users using that. And so we'll show you that. Now, some excess capacity is okay, but you get to choose how much you want capacity to be accessed. Now, if you look at the connection time, it's in the 10-second range, which is pretty good, which is not surprising, by the way, because there's excess capacity. And so you have some room to reduce excess capacity going forward. So then the next thing is, okay, what does the forecast look like? And so what we're showing you here, this is created using AI. And so it's like, let's show you what happened in the last 2 weeks. The blue line is what really happened. The orange line is what we forecast it to be. And then green line is what we are forecasting for the next week. And the only delta you will see is in that Thursday after Thanksgiving, which is we thought the forecast based on the previous Thursday was going to be low, but it was actually normal Thursday. Happens for that one Thanksgiving day in the US, and that's an anomaly that will be fixed next year. But going forward, you look at the forecast, it looks very similar to what it was the previous 2 weeks. And once you have that, you can feed that back into the control and say, here's how many desktops I want created at every half an hour in the day. And so people are using the system all through the day. But if you look at it, there is one user at some half an hour interval in the day. The majority of the users are that bright red area at the bottom of the screen. And if you want to say, okay, you know what, I want to have 250 desktops ready at this time in the day, you can create that. Today, it's a manual process still, which is we tell you what you should do, and then you have to go feed it back into the control engine. In the next release, we should have it all automated so that if you choose, we can do this all automatically in the system, where we monitor the excess capacity, we create the forecast, and we create the provisioning policy so that it's all automated behind the scenes. We see a lot of our customers using all these tools to optimize cost, and you can monitor exactly what you're spending based on this, because this gives you end-to-end visibility to tune your costs and justify why you're spending what you're spending in the cloud of your choice. The next one is user experience, which is we're all used to VDI performance. Users are in Indonesia, desktops are running in New York, and performance is driven by latency. You don't have to do that with the cloud, because there's cloud regions almost every part of the world. And if the user is in Australia, you can use a region in Australia and give very low latency performance. You can do it across clouds. You can optimize performance, price performance for each use cases. The question we get all the time here is, what if should my desktop be closer to the user or to the app? It really depends on the use case. We have seen it both ways. There are use cases where the desktop is better closer to the app, in which case you put it closer to your data center. In other use cases, the desktop makes sense being closer to the user. You can pick and choose, and you can pick any cloud, any region, and figure out where to put your desktops, and you get excellent performance. So we have a whole bunch of 3D CAD customers that are deploying the highest performance required workloads in the cloud and getting excellent user experience. So in general, I would say because we have optimized placement, your latency is going to be sub 50 milliseconds, and performance is excellent for most users. The next question we have with people is, hey, on-prem, I have complete visibility into what's going on, server, storage, networking. How do I do this in the cloud? And that's a valid question. We collect a lot of data, right? And the goal is on the right side. We want to be able to help you either proactively or reactively resolve a problem as quickly as possible. In order to do that, we collect data from every step that the user might take to get to the desktop and apps, all the way from the client, the endpoint, the gateway, the OS, the storage, the networking. And we're collecting metrics, logs, and traces, because you need all three in order to troubleshoot problems. And then the steps, the connection details, connection tracing. I'll show you some examples of what we do, but give you a lot of data in one place and use AI to help you analyze the data so that you can resolve problems faster. This is all built in, by the way. So both the pieces I showed you for FinOps and this is built into the product. It's operating from day one, and it's no extra charge. It's included in the license cost. So you don't have to go buy third-party tools. It's all built in, and it works really well. And so here's some examples. First one is, you know what, this is a customer example. They have 354 critical alarms in a month. And what we want to be able to do with this pattern mining is help you see patterns in the alarms, is it either regional patterns or category of alarms patterns, so that you can look at resolving tens or hundreds of alarms at a time versus going in and individually resolving each alarm. Sometimes a user actually calls in which case you want to know everything about that user. And we show this, if you look at the green bubbles on the bottom, it's starting from the device to the identity provider to the client to where the problem is, gateway. And then you can actually go back and look at all the details you need in order to debug that user's connection. And this is going through components. There's an alternate view which is based on tracing, which is time-based, right? Which is the user started on the client, went to control, talked to the NOC, and we get you steps of what's going on. So you can pinpoint where chronologically the problem happened. And these things are available automatically. Again, you don't have to do anything extra. We collect the data automatically. It's available all the time. We're now just introduced this feature. For some reason, it's hanging. Oh, cool, thanks. So we introduced this in the last release, which is use the community to help us drive AI. So what we're wanting, what customers are helping us and our support team is doing is once we find a problem and we resolve it, we label the problem, right? Which is what's the root cause, what is the resolution, and any commentary if you want to have. And what this helps us do is use this to, when we see the problem again or at a different customer, we can help you suggest you the root cause analysis, right? So the labeling process has started, and in the next release, we're going to start introducing suggested root causes automatically within the system. So when you look at an alarm, in addition to the connection details and the connection tracing, we're going to give you insights, which is, here's how we think the root causes are, and here's the ways to resolve the root cause. So this is pretty interesting because we think we can reduce the time to root cause analysis. So you're not doing like 6 Google searches to find out what might be happening. We're going to help you with AI to resolve the problem faster. And then the last one is, are your users happy? And so this is an example of at the end of every Workspot session, we can prompt the user to say, did you like the experience or not? And this is an example that we use all the time, which is, here's Oscar, who's a happy user, and there's Jason, who's in the same group of users, and he's unhappy. And why is Oscar happy and why is Jason not happy? And by the way, what we also notice is the people who give ratings more often. Even the happy and the unhappy users, both are actually rating more frequently, right? And so what we want to bring to the table is then, okay, how do we see what's going on behind the scenes? What's Jason's network like? What's the bandwidth usage, UDP versus TCP? What's the latency for Jason versus Oscar? What's the packet loss, retransmission rate? And if you look at this, this is really the cause. Jason has high degree of packet loss, which can lead to a bad user experience. Not something we can solve necessarily. Jason has to solve it, getting on a better network, but at least we know the cause of the problem fairly quickly. And all this data, again, is automatically collected behind the scenes and is available for analysis. So if Jason calls and says, I'm having a bad user experience, or you see the rating and you say, I want to explore this further, you can do that. And then disk latency, disk throughput. And then the last question is like, how long is this going to take? And it's really, we're driven by your speed, which is, this is our steps. We understand your requirements. Setup and resource creation can be fairly quick. If you're already in the cloud, that's even faster. Typically, we start with the first use case. We want 5 to 10 users doing UAT, right? So test the experience, refine if necessary, help you document, train the team that you have on what needs to be done. And then post-adoption, we can help you with all the stuff, which is if you have new use cases, new infrastructure, new regions, we can help you with that. If customers are super prepared, this can take 2 weeks for a few hundred users. If you have more users, then it can take a few months. And really, once you're done with the adoption phase, then it's a rollout thing, right? Which is, how do you roll out? We see customers like to roll out about 1,000 a month, if you will. There are customers who have been in an emergency situation and rolled out 2,000 users in 2 days. That's unusual. Most people are, like I would say, roll out the first 500 users in the first month, and then about 1,000 every month after that, right? So it's a fairly quick process, and you have a whole bunch of tools to help you and people skills to help you with this process. That's the 6 questions we had. Feel free to suggest other questions to us if we didn't answer them that you would like answered. But this is a pretty quick deep dive into migration.
And right on time, I might add, 29 minutes after the hour. So I'll just pop this last little poll in for you guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this content. It was useful to you. Let us know how we can best respond to you guys and follow up. If you guys want a full-on one-on-one meeting to go into this in greater detail for your environment, just click that button right there. If you want copies of this as a recording or some additional material, go ahead and click those as well, okay? So thank you for filling out that last poll that we have today. Appreciate it. All right, and that brings us to our finale. So just wanted to thank everybody for coming today. For sure, we appreciate this. Each month we do Workspot webinars and we change the topic each time. This was a deep dive on the details associated with migrating to the cloud and not to be afraid of it and how to save money and so on. Next month, we'll get back into a couple of other things, just a little more detail on Workspot and how we do various things, as well as some partner webinars as well. We've got an iGel webinar coming up where we're going to show how we work really well together with them. So thank you for coming today. Appreciate all your time. Amitabh, thank you.
Thank you, Brad.
All right, good. And look for our upcoming emails on our invites for our next webinars. Thank you. Have a great day and a great week ahead. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.